And we are live. This is exciting. This is our eighth Beyond the Canvas live stream. I'm super excited for this guest. She's on the screen. She's not a surprise. We announced her. It's funny, when we came up, Violetta, when we came up with the title of the show, Beyond the Screen, pardon me, Beyond the Canvas. Did I say Beyond the Screen? Beyond the Canvas. I was too excited. I said it the wrong way. When we came up with the title of the show, Beyond the Canvas, we actually, I'm embarrassed to admit, that Beyond the Canvas, we didn't realize the acronym was BTC, which was very apt, and it
Oh,
wasn't
wow.
on purpose. I should have just claimed that it was on purpose, but we out-clevered ourselves. This is our eighth Beyond the Canvas. It's great. I think, as you know, there's a human being behind the art, and music is art, which is something we are going to talk about. And I think it's just so important that we do dig deeper and get past. Obviously, this space is great because artists and musicians can get paid, but putting aside the sort of like financialization of everything, like there's a human, there's emotions, there's work, there's ethic, there's years of trials and tribulations that come into everything that people like yourself do, and showing that off, displaying that is so important. So after all that, after that spiel, such a pleasure to be sitting with you. You've become a good friend over the years. I think everyone watching this probably already knows who you are, but imagine that they don't, for some crazy reason. They don't know who Violetta Zironi is. Introduce yourself. Tell us about who you are. Like, when did you first pick up a guitar?
Yeah, so if we haven't met, yeah, first of all, thank you so much for having me here. And yes, you just got me thinking. We have been friends for years now, which is
Yeah,
crazy. Like it's been at least 2 years. Insanity. But yeah, my name is yeah, Violetta Zironi. I'm a musician, and I've been a musician for the longest time. So I actually picked up a piano before I picked up a guitar. That was my first instrument when I was five.
amazing.
But I picked up music before that, really, because I was in a kids choir when I was 3. So that's really when it all began. So there isn't really a time in my life where I remember not having music, all the time in my life. So yeah, and I pursued it as a career since the age of 18. I started with a talent show, like many of us do, right? X Factor, which the usual ending of that, it's either you become a pop star like One Direction, or you become forgotten, right? A lot of people just sort of go away and you don't know what happens to them. um and you could say, some people may say that that sort of happened to me. Little do they know that I just completely changed direction, because after that I had a really bad experience with a record label that was associated with X Factor, and I got fed up and decided to become independent and pursued my path as an independent artist and traveling the world and doing my thing until 3 years later. I feel like I reached real independence. I thought I was independent before, but I don't think I really was until I found blockchain and Bitcoin and Web3, which is, yeah, when I started exclusively releasing my music through the blockchain, and stopped using all the traditional services, which I don't think they really make you an independent artist. So yeah, in short, I guess here I am.
No, well, it's quite the story. I really love doing this. I think it's I enjoy it because I obviously really enjoy finding this sort of stuff out. But you said you started playing piano at 5. You always had music in your life. Was that something that was nurtured in the environment in which you grew up? Did you lean into music naturally? We like, hey, mum or dad or whoever, I'd love to learn piano. You said you're in that kids choir. You clearly had a passion for it. Do you remember where the spark came from, or was it just something that you just always have done and not quite sure, that stimulus, that moment?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I think so. I come from a family that loves the arts. So my parents are just really passionate about everything art related, whether it's music, art, ballet, food, whatever it is. They're just real enjoyers. So it's always been there. I have a feeling my dad is a musician as well as a Disney illustrator. So we'll chat about him later. I think it's got
Sure.
something to do with also the reason why we're here today. But yeah, he's an artist, like a professional artist, and always played music. And my mom, just supports him and loves everything about art. So they tell me that I was like singing, when I was in nursery, just like talking, all just singing random things. But then I think at the age of 3, my dad and I would like jam. He would play guitar, like we'd make up songs and things like that. And honestly, quite I remember the first song me and my dad jammed on was a diss track, actually, for like a
Hey, well, that's very pertinent. That's going to come full circle. I love it.
yeah, like for an uncle that we all hated. So yeah, it
That's so
starts.
good.
You know what I mean? And then he was like, I think you could sing. Like he noticed that I could sing in tune, I guess, for a 3-year-old. So he thought, to lean into that. And my mom and him sent me to this kids choir, and then the piano teacher was like, I think she would do well with piano. And then one thing led to another, and then yeah, that's it. But I've always been encouraged, and my family's so supportive. You know, yeah.
Yeah, which is so important when you're pursuing a passion, regardless of what that passion is, having people around you, people across the world like me, no, but close people, doesn't matter where they are really, like in this digital age in which we live. But yeah, it's so impactful. Do you remember your first piano teacher? Do you remember that choir?
Oh my god, I do. Yeah, she actually came to one of my concerts, back in Italy in December, and,
No
she's
way.
super proud. Yep, yep. She didn't necessarily expect that this would become my full-time job, and she basically did that, so, yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing, for her, however many years later,
Mhm.
to see one of her students, in the position that you're in. And yeah, you said obviously, you decided at 18 to become a full-time musician. That's a courageous choice. It is. It's like, if we're being real, it's a tough decision to make. Tell me about your experience. X Factor Italy. You did quite well, but like, what was that like? What do you think you got from it, and what were the things you learned from it that kind of set you on the path that you have ended up on?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just making
No, of
sure
course,
people in my
we're live.
Discord know that we're
Totally.
here. Um,
Join us. People
yeah,
can actually leave comments if they want to. We
right.
can see them on the side when they can, but all good. We've got about
Yeah,
160 people who have at least tuned in, so that's really cool, and that's
nice.
growing. But
Yeah.
yeah, do you like you mentioned you had that X Factor experience? There must have been things from that you've taken in a positive way, as well as maybe other things that happened that have been positive for you in hindsight, even if at the time maybe they were tough.
Oh, 100%. X Factors was one of the most amazing, life-changing experiences I've ever had, and I would go back and do it all over again.
Yeah,
It was amazing, and it was just very organic as well. I just showed up. When they say like how do you get in? You just go on a website and do an application, and they literally see like 50,000 people. There's booths, and you queue up for hours and play a song, and you're in or you're out. And so I passed through everything, and I was still in school. I hadn't finished high school yet. And then I was catapulted because I passed all the auditions. I was catapulted into this professional world that otherwise I would have never been a part of. So it was very much like jump in the cold water without knowing anything, and all of a sudden you're surrounded by the biggest TV producers and makeup artists and stylists, and like I met like Katy Perry, because of that when I was 18. So it was just like insane, and I learned so much. That was the only time that I got to work with a vocal coach as well. So it's an experience that was really formative for me, and I'm grateful it happened, even though the bad things that came from it, even then, they were amazing lessons. So,
yeah. And you've obviously, you took them and you learned from them. You let them challenge you and I guess spur you on rather than the other way, which is obviously one of those things that is not such an easy thing to do. Yeah, you said you met Katy Perry. It all must have been quite wild. And do you remember? Do you remember that? Obviously, it might not have been a single moment, but do you remember thinking, I want to be a full time musician because, like I said, it's not the easiest choice. There are a lot of people who would love to do it, and you have will dig into it, but you've worked so hard, obviously, and you know, I think onwards and upwards, and I think you've done terrific to this point as well. But yeah, how has that I think you could probably say. I think you even said you just did you. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Did you say you just turned 30? So it's been like
Yes.
at 12 years, 12 years since X Factor. Like, yeah, how is that? I know it's a little bit hard to put into it's a bit of a story, but how? Tell us about those 12 years, or maybe even the first few years, like 18 to 21, 22, where you were like, okay, I want to be a musician. Like, where do you go from here?
Yeah, well, I mean, I knew I wanted to be a musician from before X
Mm,
Factor. I remember when they would ask us in school, like in elementary, what do you want to be? I'd say like a musician, right? Even though I wasn't writing songs, in elementary school or anything. I just knew I wanted to do that. And then when I decided to do X Factor, and then I got that opportunity, I was like, I'm not going to pass on this. This is
yeah.
crazy. Like I had a record deal with a major label with Sony Music. I like to shout them out because they're great. No, they're not. But I name names. I
We
don't
will
care.
talk about it. We're allowed. We're gonna do it.
Yeah, I don't care. I have nothing to lose. So,
we're gonna give
um,
people the flowers that deserve it, and those that
yes.
don't, they don't get them. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So when I had that opportunity, I was like, okay, I'm gonna like scramble to finish school and get into this like full time. And I never looked back. I'm so lucky that I was always able to do music full time. Like I never had a job. You know what I mean? Or like a side job
Yeah.
where to support myself. I was always very, very broke, but I was never making a lot of money, but I always had this feeling like if I use my time to earn more money, I will take time away from figuring this puzzle out, that I'm sure there is a way to make it work. And it did take a really long time,
Yeah.
and the first few years were definitely a struggle. I didn't live a fancy life at all. I was like the broke musician playing on the street, or just, that kind of thing. But at the same time, I would do some really, really cool things because, like, when I was 21, I did my first movie, and it was a musical where I was able to sing. It was a remake of Mozart's Magic Flute, and then it won like the Oscar award of Italy, basically for
Oh,
the soundtrack.
wow.
So I was still able to do a lot of that stuff. The problem is like unless you're really established and you're doing them every day, they're not going to pay very well. You know what I mean? It's just not great pay, but it paid off, just all that work, the satisfaction, the fulfillment that came from it was just incredible. So, those first few years I always like diversified a lot. I did so many different things, different projects, but I focused a lot on crafting my songwriting, which is like the most important thing to me at the end of the day. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's really interesting. I'm glad you brought that up. Also, shout out Ragnar and or
Yes.
Ragnar and also MIDI Punks for saying hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. So you said on X Factor Italy, it was a vocal coach, and these people and those people, and then you just mentioned about your songwriting, that being a really important part of your craft. Is it? Have you had people around you that you've worked with? Have you had vocal coaches, or do you sort of teach yourself? Like, who are the people that have been in your team or in your corner?
That's a great question, and it's really, really important. I wrote music with probably hundreds of people.
Mm.
So especially the first, I would say, 5 years of my 20s. I guess since I was like 19 until 24, I must have written 1,000 songs with 1,000 different people. I don't know, but like just to really understand, learn from people that had been doing it for such a long time, or even learn from peers, from people my age, to just get that kind of experience, that kind of feedback. And then I ended up finding two people, and one in particular, but mostly these two people that I met in Berlin, where I used to live, that I decided, okay, these two are my songwriting soulmates. and I'm just gonna continue writing with them for myself. If it comes to like, writing for a movie or whatever, I'll figure it out. But when it comes to writing my own music, I'm only gonna write with these people kind of thing because they get me. It's that thing where you don't even have to explain anymore. And they've been in my corner for the last 8 or 9 years at this point. And to this day, like we live across the ocean from each other, but they're the only partners I work with creatively. So yeah, shout out to Ed and Michael. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so important to acknowledge. What is it about them, or like what are those sessions like? What, how do you? It sounds vibrant. It sounds like there's a spark, and you just know that it's right.
Well, at this point, we know each other so well that it's just like everything goes without saying. Like they'll
Yeah,
know what I mean before I even say it. It's like I'll come up with a melody, I'll bring a melody into the session, and he's gonna be like, one of them is gonna be like, wait, 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 and then pulls out his phone, goes back into his notes from like 2011, and then he's like, oh, I've got the lyrics, and then he sings them, and they're like perfect, So it's just like instant. Chemistry, that we have, just musical chemistry. We see the world in the same way, I guess, and it translates into songs. But it's magical. I don't even know how to explain it, because from day one, the very first session I did with each of them separately, we wrote some of what I think are my best songs. It's just like love at first sight, You can't explain it.
yeah, that's so cool. And were you a writer growing up? Were you always like writing things? Do you think that that helped you? It's like where I know it's a bit of a cliche question, but where does it come from?
Honestly, I love stories, and I've always loved movies a lot, and I love soundtracks so much. And so it's almost like I've always wanted to have the soundtrack to my own life. I think that was always kind of the idea behind it. I think I wrote my first song around the age of 14. It was really bad also because my English was terrible. So that was a process too, like learning how to write in another language that's not your first language, and they've helped me a lot with that. And sounding legit while you're singing, that was a big deal as well. For the longest time, I sounded not legit.
Hmm.
But yeah, I guess that's what it was. I just wanted to write my own soundtrack. You know what I mean? So.
No, I think that's like really well answered. It's a very unique answer. It's very cool. And yeah, a lot of people don't realize you didn't grow up speaking English. So like
Mhm.
English is your second language, right? You sound
Right.
fluent. You sound like honestly, if you didn't tell someone, they would assume it's your native language. But how was that transition? Like you said, you make a joke of yourself, even though I don't. Sometimes, like in person, you'd be like, I didn't want to sound like Mario, but like you didn't, and you never have. So it must have been like quite you've nailed the process, but yeah, tell us about what that sort of evolution was like.
Yeah, I've always had a passion for languages.
Yeah.
I love it. And again, my parents were really supportive with that, and they were really forward thinking. At the age of 10 or 11, my parents would like send us over to England, my sister and I, to live with strangers so that we could just like, get familiar with the language and start to learn. I really caught a passion for it. And but yeah, I've had to do a lot of like phonetic studies and really understand like how do I make this sound not just correct but real, because you can sound correct in the pronunciation but it sounds mechanic, you know what I mean, not really like you're a native. That makes a big difference when you're singing, on top than just speaking. And then just how to like use your throat, quite literally your vocal cords and your body to make certain sounds together with a melody that's just not your native one, you know what I mean. It's a whole thing, but for me it's really fun. And I think having done music for so long, my ears is pretty developed, so I can pick up um, the sounds, I guess.
For sure. And was your X Factor song in Italian?
Yes, it was.
Do
Because
you,
they
do you,
would.
do you remember it?
Oh my god, of course. Of course I do. Yeah, it's got like 1 million views on YouTube. If you know where to find it, you can find it.
Oh, good luck, people. See it.
Yeah.
Anyone
Yeah.
anyone watching, see if you can go to YouTube and dig it
Yeah.
out. Yeah, yeah. And so let's do it. You found blockchain. How did you end up finding blockchain? Was it through NFTs? Or was it through just Bitcoin as a coin? Or how was that journey? And then how did you realize you obviously had some fire in you, that passion, because of your whatever happened with Sony? You can feel free to share as much or as little as you like, but that made you realize, like, I like none of this. Like, I'm going to be independent.
Yeah. And like I said, I thought I was independent for the longest time, but
Yeah,
as long as you're using those centralized systems, you're not, because anything could go away at any given time, especially when you put yourself in the hands of middlemen, gatekeepers, and things like that. It can go really well, or most of the times it goes really bad. So, yeah, I guess with NFTs and the blockchain and Bitcoin, honestly, I was at a very low point in my career. Obviously, the COVID years were really, really hard on everybody, of course. Musicians, especially the ones relying on live performances just to pay their rent, were screwed over pretty bad. Um and and I wasn't someone who turned to TikTok, and I wasn't like, okay, now I'm gonna cook and like play my
yeah,
songs while I cook. I didn't do that. It just didn't. I felt like, why? Like, if I put so much effort into my songwriting, I really feel like it should be the songs, and it should be the people that connect with the songs. And I don't want to be behind the screens like dancing, like it's just not who I am. Um, so I was a pretty low point of my career, which actually has to do with what we're going to talk about later as well in the live stream. But my mom told me about the blockchain. She saw that I was at this very like standstill, and I had given myself 6 months time before I would just sort of give up music as a career. I was like, maybe it's time for me to move on. I've done it, and I'm still young. I can do something else, and still have music for myself. But then she was like, before you quit, have you heard of NFTs? Because at the time, this was late 2021, the end of 2021. Snoop Dogg was making music NFTs,
yeah.
and it was like that crazy bull run that I was not a part of. I came in at the very tail end of it, and that's when I was like, "This is it. I'm going all in." So, and then my life changed. It's like my second, the two big milestones in my life were X Factor and then the blockchain. So,
Yeah, it's interesting how there's sort of like the journey, but then those pivotal moments.
hmm
Uh, yeah, was there obviously, but it was multifactorial. But was there something that stuck out to you that you're like that invigorated you, and obviously you're this it's gotten you to this point and beyond. But yeah, what was it at that point?
honestly, like the fact that it was a little bit under the radar. The fact that it was somewhere else and not the same old thing. And it was a different kind of mindset that was frequenting this environment. And it had more depth. It felt immediately like there was more depth than the traditional music industry or what I was used to. Like there was more to discover and more challenges, different challenges. That was really refreshing. And the idea of owning something digitally, that struck a chord with me immediately, because it finally proved the doubts that I had that whole time, which is, what is the fucking point of Spotify? Like, why am I even paying $9 for this? Like, could never figure it out. It felt really wrong for the longest time. And then realizing you can actually own something digitally, that made it click for me, you know? So that's when I knew, you know?
I love that. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's so interesting. We've talked about it. Obviously there were middlemen, but um, it's so male dominated to say middlemen, middle people,
Middle
um,
people.
mid, middle people, middle figures. But it was still even different. Like, not that old, but I grew up where you like, my mum had her record collection. I was in love with it. She had old Beatles records, and I you physically own the music in a way. in a way. I know you didn't own it, but I remember going. I don't even honestly. Maybe they exist, maybe they don't. You go to buy a CD, or I still grew up and had some tapes. I had an Eric Clapton tape. So you kind of
Mm.
owned it. There was something, and obviously digital ownership. You can't hold it, but it's still you still own it. And yeah, and that's really fascinating. It's a completely different feel, as you said. And let's go there. You did you ever have your music on Spotify? Or you just never had it there, and obviously for good reason. Yeah, you want to talk to us about that?
Oh, I totally did.
You
And
had
I
it there,
still,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Ever since it came out, I remember when Spotify first came out, and I thought it was unbelievable that I had access to all this music. I was like, oh, finally an app, like I was still, but I was in high school when it came out. So anyway, but ever since my first single, I had my music on Spotify, right? And I still have those songs that I put out over the years. I just haven't used it for any more new music. It's just not worth my time, not worth my effort, and I don't want to support. I'm like a vegan, you know what I mean? I'm just like I'm just not gonna eat that,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So yeah,
And it's you like without the being stating the obvious, like why is that? Like really, like at its core, why is that?
yeah. Well, because I don't support what they've done and what they continue to do. I think streaming, in the big scheme of things, I look at it as a temporary solution to piracy, right?
Yeah,
Initially, with the internet existing, of course, people were going to be able to steal. That you can steal anything that's stored digitally, unless, but we'll get there. It's on the blockchain, right? So piracy was a natural consequence of the digital age, and streaming sort of put a band-aid on it and said, okay, well, now let's just make it legal, basically. Let's just turn it around a little bit and make it legal. And then it became the monopoly, because fans obviously couldn't believe their ears when they could find all that music legally without any effort for only $9 a month, which hasn't adjusted for inflation like at all in the last 15 years either. So whatever. Um, so that took on, and all of a sudden, it became almost like a social media platform. In fact, I'm particularly mad at Spotify over the other streaming platforms. For example, Tidal, I'm not so mad at, because Tidal focuses on the music. They sort of try to fit into this world by providing music for cheap, but they pay three times the artist, three times what Spotify pays. They have different options for different sound quality, so they focus on that. If you're an appreciator, you can choose also the kind of quality you want to listen to, and they don't display numbers. You don't see monthly listeners. You don't see how many millions of streams. Whereas Spotify, it really made it provoked this rat race where now everyone's turning into an influencer so they can up their Spotify numbers that don't translate to revenue. So to me, it's just like the biggest psyop, the biggest brainwash that ever happened. And I'm aware now, and I just don't want to. I don't see it useful for me for what I'm trying to achieve. So yeah, and I believe in ownership as well.
yeah, 100%. It's fascinating because, like you said at the end, they're really like turning it into a commodity. They're quantifying the person
Yeah,
rather,
yeah,
that. Whereas there's so much more to it. Naturally, like we can reflect on it. We still enjoy a good sale, and it's great. We want more people listening to your music. We'll talk about how that's going to happen later, on Bitcoin. But it's a completely different like quantification than what you're talking about. Yeah, it's like it's showing the value of the musician, not just like the other sort
correct.
of data. Yeah,
Yeah, because on Spotify as well, like there is no real significant difference between, like, you can be an unknown artist or Beyonce or Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift gets paid probably 0.006 more than me, which is not fair for Taylor Swift either. You know what I mean?
yeah,
It,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
a lot when you add it up, right? It compounds, but she makes great money on Spotify, but still not enough considering how much money she makes on her shows, how much people love her and how much she deserves because she's changing the world for the better. And yes, we do enjoy a good sale, but the best thing about the sales is like the connection. That
I
person
was,
bought it from you,
yeah,
and there isn't somebody else like putting the price tag on you. You're empowering both the artist and the buyer to have agency over their actions. And that's what Spotify took away by also eliminating the artist in the equation, because artists became non important. They actually commoditized songs more so than even the people. It's like based on the song. But I really think that a song is just one extension of a very multifaceted individual that can be an artist. I think it should be about the artist and the collector. So
100%. Yeah, it's a perfect segue because that's where I wanted to head. You've you set the price. It's your music. There's not the middleman. Then, well, there's the platform that you know. Well, you've got your own platform on your website, which we can talk about. But that there are somewhat, but people along the way to help. But really, it's bringing that collector and the creator together, or like your fans who become more than fans. They become sort of part of your life. I know that the word community can be abused, but I think that they really, you have your community which is growing. Like you have people that care about you and your journey. I know that you've done so much. You even went on a cruise and sang for, I guess, like super fans who hold certain things, and you hold Zoom concerts, and you have it, like you said before, you were just letting the people in your Discord know. Like it's brought you, the musician, the artist, the human, like closer to the people who own your music as well. That must be really special.
it really is. It's the best thing about it. Like all an artist wants is to communicate. That's why they make art. And so being able to explore that communication even deeper beyond your art and be in touch with those people, it's the greatest thing ever. Like even recently I did a live stream on Zoom, premiering my new album, 10 new songs that some of them I just finished writing, like I don't know, 3 weeks before. And there's nothing I love more than on my Friday Zooms showcasing a brand new song to them to get that first feedback. I live off of that. That's what I need to be an artist and be fulfilled. So for me, it's just the greatest thing ever. Everything could go away, even the blockchain could go away, but I know that I would still have them and we'd find another way.
100%. Yeah, and like, tell us about that because obviously, if 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 you weren't in let's just call it Web3, I actually kind of like that name. I don't know why people don't, but
Yeah.
if you weren't in Web3, like it's very difficult to have this relationship with your fans, who then become your holders, who then become part of your journey. Like perhaps at live shows you start to see familiar faces and whatnot, but it's quite unique.
Yeah, for I don't know. Is it though? Like
Well, I don't know. Tell me, like, what do you think?
it's unique for music artists for sure.
Music. That's yeah,
For yes, for music artists it is because that's another thing about just like the way the music industry is so old and so monopolized,
yeah,
where and the artists are like the holders of the value, right?
yeah,
And the labels and the managers and the all different structures that run the business side of things, they're sort of trying to control that relationship between the fans and the artists as well. So they have power over that because they know it's the fundamental part of the success of an artist, right? And they know the artists are dangerous in that sense because the fans will go where the artist goes. They don't go where the label is.
yeah.
So I think a lot of artists, because of that reason, are not used to having this kind of relationship with their supporters. They're also they also think they need millions and millions and millions of fans. There's the myth of the pop star, when if only it like I really think having a smaller group but it's tighter, it gives you the same if not more fulfillment and joy than having 2 million screaming people in a stadium, you know what I mean? So it makes it more human and it keeps you grounded too. It keeps me very, very grounded. So, yeah.
And we can see the record behind you. Is that Moonshot or
Mm.
Another Life? Which one is
That
that?
that's Another Life. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I
Uh,
guess it's quite. It's quite. It's a nice. It's like this is another life compared to where you might have
yeah.
ended up, which is very
Mhm.
poetic. But yeah, so you started on ETH. You released a lot of NFT music and did well. How? Yeah, tell us about that. Like your first mints or your first sales. Like how you kind of like grew it. Like we're getting there. We're getting to Bitcoin. How did you grow into where we're at now? But yeah, like the first part of the journey with developing community, because there's a lot to it. This doesn't just happen. You've worked insanely hard. Like you really are a Web3 music pioneer. Like I don't like people. We will touch on it, but for people to know, like obviously you're talented, and you've got all the skills, but you've had to work extremely hard. It doesn't just happen either. So yeah, like tell us about that, and also yeah, releasing I guess your first music NFTs and whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah, well, when I started, I was ready to roll. I
Yeah.
was like, I don't have a lot of time here. My 6 months deadline is still on. Time's
Okay.
ticking. So I was like, I got to get going right now. And I had time because it was still sort of COVID, things, the world was different after the pandemic. Like it really just changed. And I was finding my orientation, so to speak. And I was like, I'm just going to go all in. So I started being on Twitter, and my first few sales, they were very small editions, like 5 editions, 10 editions here and there. I did a one of one just to test the ground a little bit and start building small. Already having 5 people in your community that you're talking with on a daily basis in DMs and group chats, that's already more than a lot of artists could probably handle, quite
Yeah. Yeah.
honestly. Like music artists, I mean, because visual artists are a whole other breed, way smarter in my opinion. But um, they're used to having collectors and things like that, right? Whereas the traditional fan, you don't think you're going to talk to them on the phone necessarily. So it started that way, and then I had this album that I'd made 6 months before in Nashville. Um, that was just like my sort of like last chance album. I was like, I'm just gonna do this. I'm gonna make one last album and see if I can figure something out. And then I stumbled upon Web3 and the blockchain, and I was like, this is it. And it's called Moonshot, and I went for the moonshot. It's so like poetic as well. The way it all aligned, I still like kind of pinch myself about it because I can't believe it's so on point. And so I worked with my dad, who I mentioned earlier is a Disney illustrator, and we got the chance to work together on that. He drew the artworks, and put out this collection, which was big. It was 2,500 pieces at like 0.05 ETH each. So, like, substantial stuff. And I was only in Web3 for like 3 months at the time. But I put, turbo mode on. Like, I was up at all hours. Like I was 18 hours a day on, like every day, all through the night until 8 in the morning. It was crazy, and so that went great, But it was a lot, like, but everything is a lot, That's what I tell artists as well. A lot of people ask me outside of the space, oh, but you're always online, or you're always talking to people. You're always like, you never go out, you never go on vacation. I'm like, I mean, you think I don't know. Like, there's people like Elon is way worse than me. I think. You know what I mean? I think he
Guy.
does.
Don't know if he sleeps. Yeah. A guy
Yeah,
living on
like
some kind of robot like lifestyle.
everything is hard, and if you love it, and if it gives you that immediate, like that thrill, that adrenaline. For me, it was just amazing to even be able to perform on spaces in real time, have people like listen. That's already amazing, just for people to listen. So yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Like you said, there's all of these moving parts, and you just embraced it. What are some of the key learnings that you've taken from all of that in regards to spaces and going to events and hosting a Discord and having a little team around you, and you're like a group on X, and like releasing on different chains? Like there's so that's probably just a handful. I'm sure that I know that there's way more.
Mm.
Yeah. Has the balance improved? Have you refined things? Have you prioritized? Like, how do you structure all of that?
For sure, I think community is the number one, and I'm not afraid to abuse the word because
Well, no,
it
you're a
is
great example of it. Yeah,
it's the most important thing. Like
yeah,
once you have your group and you're really honest with them and you're really upfront and you share the journey in a genuine way because you want to. And it comes easy to me because I'm extremely extroverted. I get energy from being with people and I match other people's energy, and so it's easier if you're very extroverted, and I think I am. Um but that's the most important thing. They've given me some of the best memories, like even just being on the cruise, like when would I ever, do that for people on a beach? Like it's just incredible. And that's the number one thing. And I don't think you necessarily just can do that just with the blockchain. People do create great communities outside
yeah,
of Web3, but the blockchain allows you for that even more direct connection because it's from me to you. Like
yeah.
that's it, and you can see it and there's no lies detected, So um I would say that's the number one thing. And a lot of artists are like scared of the tech part, intimidated by the complexity of it, but I really don't think it's the biggest challenge. I think if you really put your mind to it, you can figure it out. It's not playing guitar is harder than figuring out
I was
the
going to say,
blockchain,
I was like,
Yeah.
you can just come and ask me that part. I'll leave the guitar playing and the singing to you
Yeah.
because,
Making art is harder than figuring out how to use a wallet for sure. So,
yeah,
yeah, I'd say focusing on community has been the best thing I think that I could do.
yeah, absolutely. And now Bitcoin. You obviously were hyper aware of Bitcoin prior. Like I guess the advent of ordinals, the advent of the ability to inscribe data or a file, music, any art, music is art, onto Bitcoin, that grabbed you straight away. I remember, like, you were just kind of like, this is something I have to do. This,
Hmm.
like, naturally, I think, and we've talked about it. I think that music on other chains also definitely makes sense, but putting certain things on Bitcoin and having music on Bitcoin, which is another acronym for mob, which we'll talk about, that stuck out at you, didn't it?
Oh yeah, 100%. I remember even that. Like, I I learned about ordinals playing in the frog spaces. Like
I remember, yeah.
like that's how. I mean, it's the most amazing tool as well. Spaces, it's incredible, especially for musicians because you can just play a song. But yes, when I first learned about it, I thought this can be an amazing added layer to your message. If you have a message that aligns with Bitcoin's stance and Bitcoin's purpose, this is your best tool to put it out and preserve it forever. So I agree with you. Music makes sense on all blockchains depending on what you're trying to do. I try to always be very intentional.
Mm.
But especially at the time when I learned about ordinals, I was in this very like, very fierce phase where I was just angry. Like I was, very much proud of the blockchain and Web3. And I was like, how could they not, let us do this before? And I was like, oh my God, like this is the extreme opposite, and I just wanted to go super radical there. So yeah, I started looking into how to do it, which of course was complicated for the first few months and expensive, and everyone was still trying to figure it out. But it was no brainer for me. Like I had to do it, and yeah, within a couple months, I had a song inscribed, and yeah, here we are now.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because we know how culturally and societally important music is, and has been for centuries, really. Uh, the ability to preserve it is really important. The ability to preserve any art, but I think music really stands out as something which I think is important, really important to preserve personally for many reasons. But yeah, like that must have been a pretty considerable factor for you too.
Absolutely, especially because music is it's almost like the most abstract form of art, because you cannot ever touch it. Um, Very few people, compared to the population of the world, can even read it, or make it. It's just there. It's in the air. It exists within us. It's everywhere and nowhere at the same time. So therefore, it's very hard to own it, to make it yours, to build that relationship, um, like physically with it. And with vinyl and tapes and CDs, of course, that was what we had, and that did the job for a long time. But even that, is just like a very non-permanent piece of plastic that all it takes is a little scratch, and you can't play the CD anymore. You know what I mean?
Happened to
Um,
everyone.
Right, and then,
Yeah.
like, in the digital era, we're we're very mobile, right now. Like, we move so much, we live in smaller spaces, we're more efficient with things. Just carrying your music around with you, in a way that you own it, is almost impossible, right? Because you're not gonna fly across the ocean with your vinyl collection. You're just not gonna do that, right? So, um I do think the physical aspect is still very important, and maybe we can touch on that later based on something else. But
Yeah, of course.
it's super for me, like having a way to digitally truly own a piece of music. And I don't owning music doesn't mean like owning the copyright to it
Right.
necessarily, right? When you own a painting, the artist still owns the copyright, but you own the unique copy. I think that's
Yes.
incredible, and that's an honor. So, yeah, it's a revolution, and music needs it even more so than maybe other kinds of arts because it's so like in the air.
Yeah, yeah, and it goes without saying that in Web3, music is still a drop in the ocean. The whole Web3 space is a drop in the ocean, but music still feels like a bit of a drop in the ocean in regards to people collecting it and it becoming like part of the norm of like what's in one's collection. Like if the data would stand up to that fact.
Yeah, it is. I think that's because the reason because of that is the music. Honestly, it's the music industry that's just such a giant. It's like the same way banks are very much resistant to adopting Bitcoin because it disrupts their business. It disrupts
Mm.
their model and monopoly. The music industry is just like that. There's higher power that we can't even comprehend. And power plays and so much money, and it's a business like BlackRock. The BlackRock actually owns some of the biggest record labels. So it's that. You know what I mean? And that's why it's so hard, I think, to eradicate it, convince artists that they can stray away and be independent. But I have no doubt in my mind that it will happen in a really big way. Um, and when it happens, it will be so disruptive that the world for how we know is going to change, because culture and music, as we know, all art, um, moves culture, moves the world, affects things. Like Taylor Swift definitely could have the power to change how how the world is working right now. So yeah, it's going to happen.
Yeah, and I'm sort of jumping back a bit before we go back into Bitcoin. Like I'll ask the questions separately because they're kind of independent of each other in a way. Yeah, your dad has done all of your illustrations or almost all of them yet. So like it must be amazing to work with your dad and have him as a part of your legacy.
It really is, because he's been part of my, I guess, like no, like formation since I was little. He was
Yeah.
the one who was like, okay, now you do piano, and you don't have a choice, kind of
Yeah.
thing. You know what I mean? Hated him for that for the longest time, but it does feel really good, to be able to express myself that way as well, because I don't think I would have been able to in Web 2 for the just for like the conventional things that an artist like me should have done. Even now when you go to Spotify, you look at singer songwriters like me, they all look the same. Like, the girl with a guitar dressed the same way. Like, I could never come up with drawings that look like a Disney, movie and be taken seriously, which is so silly because it's just outside of the traditional rails a little bit. So this allowed us to work together. And me and him, have had our ups and downs because as artists we fight, of course. But this definitely, like, brought us closer together. So
Yeah, and also it wasn't my follow up question, but shout out to your mum for getting you into NFTs. Like that's a cool mum. She was on it before you were.
she is the real she is the real reason of everything. Like, and to this day, like, I remember when ordinals came out and I
Yeah,
told her about it. She was like, "You have to inscribe ASAP." Like, she was just like, "You have to do it. You cannot not do it. Like, you have to
yeah.
take this opportunity. It's amazing." So yeah, she's the number one player in this.
I love that. Yeah, Ragnar says W for Zironi's parents, but
Oh my god,
um,
yeah.
and then it's funny you've mentioned Taylor Swift a few times. I don't know your thoughts or feelings are around her, or who are musicians in the traditional, let's call it the traditional music space that you do look up to, or that you have taken learnings from or positives from. Maybe not even necessarily like musically, but I mean more like ethically, career wise. Maybe even yeah, like how you approach your music as your job, obviously as a passion, but as your job and as a craft.
So yeah, I mean, Taylor Swift. I'm not necessarily a fan of her
Yeah, no,
music, but I do think she. Oh my God, she worked so hard,
yeah,
and she's just like, I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna do whatever it takes. So I do look up to people like her. I look up to, like, um ethic wise, like Lady Gaga. There is no one more fierce than Lady Gaga. Like, she's just a menace for everybody. Like, she will win no matter what she does, and you can see it even if you're not a fan of her music. It's just the passion comes out of her pores, and I just try to remember that, that this is my passion, that no one forced me to do this. It's entirely my choice, and therefore my responsibility, and it's entirely up to me. So yeah, people like that really inspire me.
well, that's inspiring for the rest of us. It's very inspiring for me. Obviously, not here to talk about some of the things that I've done like personally, but obviously like our relationship and what we're gonna, what we've just yeah, like how we've known each other for a couple of years, and there's lots
Yeah.
to it. And then obviously what we're about to do together at Gamma. But um, yeah, back to Bitcoin. So your first how many songs have you got on Bitcoin now? Is it 4 or 5 now?
I think at this
Or is it more? It's about 4 or 5.
hmm,
Regardless,
yeah,
doesn't
something like
yeah,
I think it's 5,
like
yeah.
your first song that went on, and
hmm
then yeah, tell us about that, and then let's talk about the song
I
that
think
sold
it's
for a Bitcoin, which
6. I think it's
six.
6 now.
I think
Okay.
so. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd have to have a look. It's all on chain. The chain
hmm
is the alpha. The chain doesn't lie. We can go find it. But uh, yeah, like how did that feel having like that moment where you're like, oh, my song is on chain on Bitcoin. For as long as Bitcoin lives now, my song lives. So a long time. That's what we're betting on it being the chain that is going to last. Like that's the whole thing. So yeah, like there must have been a feeling, apart from the fact that the other parts of it, but just that like wow moment.
Oh yeah. It was crazy. The first inscription was a celebratory song for the first 10 years of my career.
Yeah,
So that was an important moment because, like I said, it was just a lot of ups and downs and a lot of struggles and satisfying moments, and I was always able to sort of come back and, like, keep going. And a decade, I was like, I think this deserves to live forever, no matter what happens. At least I know there's that to remind me. Um, and the idea of someone being able to find it in hundreds of years and hearing a story, about a girl who, despite everything, she still has some music in her, and keeps going. That was very poetic in my mind, and I would like to make that happen for whoever in the future, right? And then I sort of was like, okay, this feels good. I'm gonna keep going. But it was always like I'm only gonna inscribe things that I think not that deserve it, because I think some
Mm.
of my I don't have preferences in my songs necessarily. I don't think one is more valuable than the other, but what the message of the song was, it's really an extension of the artistic expression for me, the chain that I use or the purpose behind a specific inscription or NFT. What else do I want to say with this? What else do I want to leave behind? If it's this, then Bitcoin. If it's that, then ETH. So
Yeah, and that circles back to what we were talking about earlier. And there were just it would just be a feeling, like you said, like this. I
yeah.
feel like for various reasons, this is going to go on Bitcoin, and then this is going to go on ETH, or this is going to go on base, or whatever. Who knows?
Right.
But yeah, I love that. And then everybody cried when they saw the video of you crying happiness. I cried. I'm not gonna lie.
Aw.
I'm an emotional guy, so it doesn't take much. But um, no, it does take a little bit. That was a very emotional moment for me as well. Your song, which so the No Ordinary Kind song, you can give them a shout out too and tell us a little about that. But that sold for a Bitcoin. That was like it was awesome.
Thank you so much. And yeah, it was a crazy moment for me. I loved writing that song a lot because it was like it sort of came from this collaboration that I did with this amazing team, Seize Control. And I travel the world kind of carrying the no ordinary kind message, carrying that flag and finding the so-called no ordinary kinds, and speaking with them and making interviews and just thinking about that concept of the no ordinary kind as in someone who goes against the grain and they're not afraid. They just keep going and they're fighting for what they feel is right no matter what. That was an emotional idea for me that I really resonated with. And I was just drawn to write a song. Like I wasn't necessarily that wasn't my task at the beginning. My task was like, okay, you're an ordinary kind. They said, why don't you go around carrying this message? But then as I was conceptualizing the whole thing, I was like, well, I guess this is how I express myself, right? And the song just sort of came out. Um and it became like almost like the anthem of that concept. And then yeah, I decided to inscribe it and then shout out to them and the collector. And then yeah, it was just an amazing moment. And I really hope that it inspires other people, other musicians. That's sort of the best takeaway would be, I hope that people see that it's possible, if you feel like you are no ordinary kind, trust your gut. Go for it. You never know what's going to happen. And there's no ceiling, So,
Yeah. It's a great message, and it's a really important message. Look, it's a really important message for everyone, but it's a really important message for musicians because it showed we knew, or some people know, that music is valuable, and it sold, like a Bitcoin, so not like amazing, but it gave that value. It's very different to paying like obviously like vastly different to paying you $9 on Spotify, and the
yeah.
artists who you're listening to might never get paid. Like it showed that music is valuable, and also, well, you can talk about this. Like one music is a very unique concept. Everyone
Yeah.
can listen to it. I can go find it on the chain and listen to it. I don't own it. It only like it only one person owns it. It's a one of one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Shout out. I mean, the Seize Control team, like, they're people that, like, they put, they act on what they say, right? So they understood, like, this concept so well. They even put the song as part of some of their collection traits. So if people don't
Mm.
know, like, they should go check it out. The ones with the headsets, headphones and stuff, they actually play the song. So yeah, they're just the best, some of the best people I've ever met. But they understood this concept really well. Where like the same as you can do with visual art, you can totally see a picture, digital art online. But owning something is different. There are things that you can do when you own something, like put the song on your own project. You know what I mean? And the same goes for music. It's just because it's so intangible, because it's so ephemeral. Um, I don't think it came natural necessarily. So this is even more revolutionary because you can do something that was never ever possible. But in reality, yeah, like even with digital art at the beginning and still now, like traditional art people are like, well, this is just a picture on the internet. Everyone can look at it, sure, but not everyone can own it. Not everyone can sell it. Not everyone can do whatever it is. Like renting a house, yeah, sure, you still the utility of the house, you still have it, like you still live in it, but it's not yours. You know,
Hmm.
so
Yeah, and humans like to own things and
oh, for
collect
sure.
things.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's fascinating that way. It was funny. I loved what you said when you said that the song became the anthem for that whole campaign or that whole event or that whole collection, because it got me thinking. When you watch a film, sometimes the soundtrack to a film is very
Mm.
obvious, but sometimes it's not. But it's so important to a film. There's these soundtracks, or there's like songs that are part of your favorite TV show that the music really becomes like part of your life. You hear a song and it will take you back to a moment or take you back to a film that you loved or a scene or a character. Like you said, this song became the anthem of that campaign. And when you say it out loud, it sounds super obvious, but it's not until you kind of like acknowledge that.
Oh yeah, like music and I think smell is
Mm.
is is like two of those things that just bring you back, no matter what. And you could smell something or taste something, it'll just bring you back to your childhood. And music does that same thing. And good good that you brought up the TV show, the movie, like conversation, because it's like movies, even when they don't have music, when there isn't anything playing in the background, it's intentional because it builds that empty space that you need to then feel the next emotion that's coming even more when the music comes in. So it is really an essential thing. Um, and like even now thinking about, when that song was born, No Ordinary Kind, brings me back to like Bitcoin Nashville last year, because that was like the time that it was all sort of unraveling for us. So yeah.
For sure. And yeah, and you live in Nashville, and Nashville's a
Yes.
very historic place when it comes to music. So that like obviously that was an intentional move of yours, but must play into. I've sort of moved away from Bitcoin. We're going to come back, but I meant to bring this up earlier. Yeah, it must play into like your psyche and living there and being part of a place that has like music at its roots.
Yeah, it's very stimulating, and it's amazing that I can my hunger for good music is never there. Like it's always fulfilled any time of day I can go and experience some incredible talent and passion, especially. Um but there's something about Nashville that, like, the music industry is here, as opposed to maybe other music cities like Austin, for example, which is another amazing music place. um, is not under the grip of the industry as much. Nashville literally has like Universal Music, and all those have their Nashville headquarters, just like Miami has it for Latin music. Nashville has it for country music, folk, Americana, singer songwriters. So it's like their own little kingdom here. And on the other hand, there's a really big Bitcoin presence in Nashville. The Bitcoin magazine is based out of Nashville, and there's a museum. And shout out to the guys at the museum and Bitcoin Park. Like it's really growing, and I feel like I'm sort of the like infiltrating the music industry a little bit, but bringing that other side. I'm sort of here for the change and trying to evangelize like the people that are still in the industry. I love being here for that reason as well.
Totally. And I know that the mob did their thing in Miami. The mob needs
Yes.
to do their thing in Nashville. Maybe they already have.
Oh
I
my god. Yeah.
I feel like the mob is a really nice segue into what you're going to be releasing. So let's talk about the mob.
Yeah. So the mob, it all started actually with the No Ordinary Kind song, and me and Sav were talking about, can we do like a flash mob, like a fuck streaming kind of flash mob for Art
Yeah, yeah.
Basel. And And then we just came up with this idea, why don't we show up like outside of Spotify? And then myself and a few other musicians rallied the troop and we were like, let's do this. I'll bring ski masks and signs and we're just going to scream. I don't know what we're going to do, but we're just going to show up with our signs and make some noise. And it was incredible. And the security guard came and kicked us out. They were like, no, you can't be here. Which was our goal, honestly, disrupt,
Yeah,
cause some
yeah, yeah.
disruption. And so mission accomplished. And then, yeah, the mob is just like, it means a lot of things. It means musicians on blockchain, musicians on Bitcoin, musicians over bullshit as well,
Mhm.
which is like sums it all up, basically. And, you know, it was just a way for us to stick together and show up when we need to, and support each other. So
Yeah, no, so awesome. Plus, you weren't really doing anything wrong, but they were always going to move you on. It's
yeah.
part of it. But I'm
Hmm.
glad you did it. I'm glad you did it. And shout out to all of the people who, yeah, the Seas Control guys, Sovereign,
Yeah.
and also, the other musicians who went along with you.
Go
Yeah,
mob.
yeah, the mob is cool. And then the mob is the mob is standing up against things, and not like you said, musicians over bullshit. And so a diss track, like you said, your very first song with your dad was a diss track as well.
Yeah.
Diss track is calling out the bullshit as well. And like, I'm gonna let you tell us what people have found it. It's on chain. It's kind of
Mm.
a cool thing about Bitcoin, really. If you're keeping an eye on what's going on chain, I actually think that that's kind of fun. Because it lives there. What what is coming up? We got Bitcoin Vegas next week.
Hmm.
You're calling out the bullshit through a song.
Yeah. So I guess it's that time. So I just,
It is. I think it is.
like I thought, I think like it's a really great use case, for inscriptions and ordinals. I don't know if there's a better one. Like diss tracks are a thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
and their whole goal is to reach as many people as possible and not get taken down as well. Because a lot of the times, you some people go a little far in their diss tracks as well. Not that I would ever do that, but it is a concern sometimes. And censorship um issues and free speech and all that, like as long as you're not being really really rude. But all an artist ever wants when they write a diss track is for that to always just be there, available in case someone wants to check it out. You know what I mean? And so I had this song that I wrote at probably the lowest point in my artistic career, in my career, in my life, which was 2021. Um, Before I knew anything about Web3, I was trying to figure it out, trying to get out of that hole that the pandemic had put me in. And I was literally traveling all over Europe, sleeping on floors in sleeping bags, like trying to make it work, doing movie auditions and scrambling, getting grants. I was living off of government support pretty much. And I'd gotten a grant to make my Moonshot album, to go to Nashville and do it. A few months before, I had quote unquote like fired my manager because I didn't think our visions aligned anymore. I actually thought, I was ready for a fresh start and I didn't think we were a good fit for each other anymore, which is fine. It happens all the time. It's normal. You have terms, like for when that happens. Problem is, she didn't take it very well. She took it really personal. She I hate to put it that way, but like she had a lot of money, just like her own like family, she was just from a very wealthy background, meaning she didn't really go through all the struggles that I went through. And it was hard for her to understand my struggles and also hard to be rejected and not be able to buy what you want, because you cannot buy a person really. So yeah, when we quote unquote broke up, she demanded that I would pay back some money that she fronted me years before to make some recordings, that I was paying back through commissions and installments, just like labels do. You just pay over time. It's not like you can pay all at once. but I couldn't afford it because I was broke. Like, it was a pandemic. I was living off of like government support. Um, and that was her chance to use her status and wealth and power to say, okay, we're not moving on together. You're not moving on alone. And so she demanded the money and got the court to freeze my bank account. And I was in Rome doing an audition for a movie, and I try to pay, and it's not working, and I was stuck, and I very little money I had was going to use for this album, the grant that I had received. Um, so it was a very bad moment because of all these things compounding together, and me just not seeing a way out. Like, I just didn't know how I was going to get out of not being able to be a musician because of COVID, and plus that on top of it. And I was so angry. But I could do nothing. Like, I didn't have money for a lawyer. Like, I just couldn't, you know what I mean? I could do nothing. And I was like, what can I do that she cannot take away? I can write a song. And it's going to make me feel better. Um, and I have this. And that also made me realize how powerful music just is. It transcends status, power, wealth, money. And that's why it's in such a tight grip as well, because the fact is so fluid. It's like water, you can't control it, right? So I wrote a song, and I was able to get out of that tricky situation and use some of the album money, unfortunately, to get out of it. I had to, but at least I had the song, and I put it out on Spotify. But even then, I was like, I wonder if this is going to be taken down. So I had to do research and actually had to ask a lawyer, like, if I put this up, can she like do something? That crossed my mind. If she doesn't like it with her status and power, she could do something. Um, and with that in mind, now I think it's a good time for that song to come home, to come where it belongs, where you cannot freeze Bitcoin. You cannot freeze a bank account. You cannot use your wealth, power, status to crush somebody. Um, and with the Bitcoin Vegas next week and all your support, you guys at Gamma, I think, we decided we would do an open edition, which is something I've never done. This is my first open edition, and it's going to be very, very accessible. And the whole point behind this, in my opinion, is like, it's like a personal issue at this point. Like, it's a personal like vendetta that I want as many people as possible to know about this, own it, have it, and even have it in their homes so that when people walk in, they know the story. I think now I finally have what I need to complete this cycle of uncertainty. And because I have all the tool, I have the knowledge, I have Bitcoin, I have you guys, and I just want the story to be out there and be supported by the safest network there is. So yeah, it's coming out on Monday.
Super exciting. Yeah. Oh, look, it's a very truly, it's like a heavy and difficult story, and I think that it does. It really is that nice like mob kind of moment, that musician over bullshit, because that is
Yeah.
bullshit what happened, and it's we've talked about one music, but then also we've talked about other chains and what they can bring in terms of like distributing music, because it's cool, like lots of people can own this piece, but the one of one, the original, is still on chain. It's still the original piece. The additions point back, and like I guess you and we referenced it on a space the other day. It's kind of like the first press of a vinyl, and then the rest of the run. It's very unique in that way, because like everybody can still own one, but there'll still only be there is still only that first press too. So it fits really nicely into you being able to sell your music directly from you, but also going back to that actual like ownership thing, and then on top of it, that very strong message, and then each of those editions are an inscription on Bitcoin too. It's like amplified.
For sure. I mean, even with the No Ordinary Kind, the song, you can play it from some of their PFPs as well,
Yeah.
so that it became more widely spread and more accessible. But the OG, right, the original piece, the one of one, is is the one that they only copy, right?
Exactly.
And with this song as well, I just wanted to be able to involve more people. You know, I want the story to be out there. I want it to be known, and potentially another piece of inspiration for other artists, or even just raise awareness about how it goes, you know, how it goes most of the times. And this song carries a message, and I think that's what Bitcoin does. It carries messages, truthful messages. um and Yeah, so I'm super excited. I've actually been wanting to inscribe this song for the longest time. It was the first one that I experimented with when I first learned about ordinals, but because I wanted the whole production, which is a new version compared to the one that I put on Spotify, I wasn't able to at the time. Like, the tech wasn't there yet. So it is coming full circle, you know, that now it's finally there. You guys helped me so much. And there's different artworks too, different versions that
Yeah,
people can try to grab. So it's exciting.
it is. And hats off to Jack, one of our engineers, who's just like,
Hmm.
he's a guru. He's like,
Yeah.
he's speaking at Vegas as well. I made a comment under his thing, like, he's kind of like one of the most stealth goats in this space. People don't realize some of the magic that he's woven.
I know.
Like, just I woke up this morning and saw some of what you guys were working on, on Discord, because obviously time zones, and I wake up and see, kind of have to catch up. Like, incredible stuff. Yeah. So there's 8 artworks. So when people mint, they don't know what they're going to get. So go and mint more than one, obviously, if you can, or if you want to, because they're kind of like, they're unique individual pieces in their own right too, which I think is a really very cool concept for an open edition.
Yeah. Well, the way that artwork was born, it is really about, and I guess I'm going to show it after the space, after this live stream, but it represents the message of the song, and it had different variations because it's all, the world is vast, and I want as many people as possible to relate. So there's different currencies featured in this collection, and it's 7 variations of the artwork. Actually,
7, yeah.
there is one of Bitcoin, of course, as well, which
Yeah.
is like, I guess a cool one that people may want to try and get. But yeah, if people want to complete a set, they're $20 each, right? So that was the whole thing. Like, I loved when you proposed this to me, because I was like, this is the song that I want to do this with, and no other song would be more perfect at this time. And I also wanted to do something, because going back to, I want this message to be as spread out as possible. I was like, if people have all 7, right? If they go all out and they're like, okay, I'm gonna get all the 7 different versions and complete my set, because fuck that bitch, kind of thing. I will send those people a print, one of the artworks of their choice, printed for free at home, so they can hang it up. And their guests, when they have dinner parties, are going to be like, why do you have a butt in your living room surrounded by like Bitcoin or like Japanese yen? What is that? Oh, and then you have a chance to tell the story. So keep spreading the word about this. So this is all I want, and I want, eventually my dream would be that that person realizes what's happening because they find it on Bitcoin. So
Well, that's it. Like, art can really, like, spread a message, and culture has brought so many more people to Bitcoin. It's so cool. Yeah, sorry, I've said 8. I had 8 in my head. It is 7.
it's okay.
Yeah, it was so great, because I remember you showed me the track, and we've been fortunate with some low fees lately, but it's really high quality. Like, it's, the fidelity of it is lovely, and I didn't realize it was going to be the first song, or at least something you were considering about being the first song. So it's really elegant in that way, and you're going to be performing it for those who are at Bitcoin Vegas during cocktail hour, so that's exciting too. So hats off. I look forward to seeing you there. I'll be making the trip, so everyone who comes will also get to see that in person too. And I think everyone can relate to a diss track in one way or another. Like, we've all got a bit of diss track in us somewhere.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
It's diss tracks are great because you can just share them and subtly say, like it's
Yeah.
just a song, it's just a song. But it can be powerful and very sharp. Mine is, chill. Like I'm not gonna be extra rude. I'm gonna keep my cool. But I'm gonna say it how it is. I'm just gonna say what I think. So yeah, I'm just excited, and I see. I would never write diss tracks either. Like you have to really, 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 really piss me off. Most of my songs are really nice, like really hopeful or like sad or questioning myself. But this one is not. So yeah,
Yeah. No, I love
I'm
it. I love it.
excited.
So am I. I'm so excited. It's been coming. We've talked about collaborating in one way or another. We've obviously collaborated in other ways through other sort of channels. But it's been such a pleasure, Violetta. This has been such an awesome chat as well. I just like I said at the very start, I think digging deeper and giving people the time to tell their story is so important because, like you said, despite what the music industry is trying to do to musicians, like there's a human being here, and I think that is absolutely key and at the core of all of this. So thanks so much for spending time with us. I can't wait to see you next week. But for those who don't make it, we'll be posting stuff that collect the track and support music on Bitcoin and support musicians over bullshit. And thanks so much, for spending the time. I can't say thank you enough.
Thank you. You guys, the Gamma team is just superior. Honestly, you really are pro creator, pro artist, artist first, and it shows every day with everything you do. So, yeah, thank you so much. Do you want? I can play a snippet of the song if you want live on the screen.
I didn't want to like expect it, but if you are offering, I reckon that would be a lovely way to send it out.
Yeah, for sure. And then next week at the parties at inscribing, right? At the cocktail
Correct.
hour.
Yeah.
So if people are there. All right, let me grab.
They will be hanging around because it's going to be super cool to watch, and the screen's going to be amazing. But yeah, look, what an awesome thing to do. I didn't want to expect it, so thank you for offering. But yeah, so everybody who's tuned in, we've had like over 550 people, which is really cool.
Nice.
Thank you to everyone who has been watching and listening. This will also get published to our YouTube later today or tomorrow. But to send us off,
all right.
Zironi.
Poor Millionaire, available on Monday on Gamma. Open edition. It's going to be open for a week. And my community knows this song. I've been playing it over and over and over and over ever since I met them, pretty much. So, hope you guys like it. Good luck to you and all your friends. You get what's coming in the end. 'Cause you're the worst kind of girl I know. But at least you won't burn in hell alone. I'm just joking, you won't have to wait. You're already lying in the bed you made. And your money, it might keep you rich. But nothing changes 'cause you're still a bitch. Maybe no one ever loved you when you were young. Something went wrong and I should feel sorry. And all the money in the world can help you. You were just scared, a poor millionaire who couldn't buy love, no matter how much you tried. It's not too late to apologize. It must be hard to live through someone else with so much talent you don't have yourself. There's only two types of girls and guys: those who create and those who waste their time. So tell me, which side have you been on? Did you lift me up or drag me down? No matter how much I'd like to forgive, nothing would change because you're still a bitch. Maybe no one ever loved you when you were young. Something went wrong and I should feel sorry, and all the money in the world can help you. You were just scared, a poor millionaire who couldn't buy love no matter how much you tried. I think it's too late to apologize, because now it's inscribed on Bitcoin forever.
Yes, it is.
So, yeah, thank you very much. All right.
Thank you so much, Violetta.
Thank you. Thank you.
We are off air. That was